Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Jack Michaelman, and I'm a first-year MBA student at the Owen School of Business here at Vanderbilt, and I'm also a first-year board member of the student club OVEC. And as I've studied entrepreneurship here at Vanderbilt, the one thing has become clear: it takes a team to turn an idea into reality, and one of the key and often overlooked partners are those consultants and organizations who help the entrepreneur at critical points of growth. We're also glad you've chosen to join us today for the 2022 Vanderbilt Entrepreneurship Conference presented by the Center for Entrepreneurship. And this is the Startup Ecosystem Partner Track. So for the next hour, you're going to be hearing from key partners who help entrepreneurs at various stages of their journey. And these partners are also entrepreneurs themselves. So they'll share their stories and why they've chosen to work with startups and founders. These individuals and organizations are the wind beneath the wings, so to speak, of early stage companies, helping them achieve more than they thought possible. So I invite you to enjoy these entrepreneurial partners and their stories as they share their own journey and the lessons they learned along the way. And first up, without further ado, we welcome Matthew Charette, Catalyst Chair for EO Nashville and owner of MDC Group. Matt is a longtime hospitality veteran with over 25 years in the business. And for the past 18 years, he has owned and operated restaurants and bars totaling over $50 million in sales. Matt is a lifelong learner and is passionate about helping fellow entrepreneurs learn the skills and tools required in running and growing a successful business. So again, thank you for being with us today, Matthew. I'll let you take it from here.
Let's hope I can live up to that introduction. So today I want to share with you the toughest question an advisor ever asked me, what I learned from it, and how it might help you too. I've been an entrepreneur for the past 20 years. And there's a lot of different things that I've experienced, and I got into entrepreneurship in 2003 when I opened my first company, and had a lot of experience in the restaurant industry. And people said, "You know what, Matt, you should just open your own place." So I decided that I would join other people in entrepreneurship, and I started on my first venture. And what I realized, one of the best things that happened to me was in 2016, after about 12 or 13 years of being an entrepreneur and opening up my own places, as I joined the Entrepreneur Organization of Nashville. It's a global organization. There's about 16,000 members worldwide, with 61 chapters. And at that point, I had the opportunity to get involved in EO's Nashville's Catalyst program. What's special about Nashville's Catalyst program is it's a program that was built by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs in order to help young startup entrepreneurs early in their journey learn some of the tools and skills, and also build their own network and be supported by a bunch of peers as well. For me, the past 20 years has had a lot of highs and lows. And I think a lot of times when I'm talking to folks who are starting out, they don't realize that entrepreneurship is going to have a lot of really high highs and probably some really low lows. And I'll be honest with you about my highs and lows. Some of the best things that happened to me is I was able to generate over $50 million in revenue over the past 20 years, which has helped me generate a lot of money and create a lot of opportunities for myself. One of the other great things is that being in the entrepreneur community, it's created a tremendous amount of just opportunities to do other things. And I was able to purchase the buildings that my restaurants are in. I have 3 restaurants in East Nashville. And about 5 years ago, I was able to purchase the property in East Nashville. So that was a really high for me, something I never thought I'd be able to do. And the lows, I've had some pretty bad lows. When I opened one of my first restaurants about 18 years ago, We had a review in the Nashville scene, and it was probably one of the worst reviews that you'd ever read. I don't think I've ever actually read it at this point. It was just too difficult for me. But I did talk to the person who wrote it, and it was very insightful. And yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. It's very stressful and very difficult. I had a very good friend of mine who worked for me embezzle thousands of dollars from me and my company. That was pretty devastating. And then 2 years ago, on March 3rd, 2020, we all know the Nashville tornado ripped through, but it ripped right through 5 points in East Nashville where my buildings and my businesses are, and it destroyed all 3 of my businesses because they're right next door to each other, and it actually totally demolished one of my buildings. So, you know, speaking of highs and lows, one of the highs yesterday is we relaunched the 3rd in the series of restaurants. So all 3 are back open and launching in the middle of the pandemic, pretty challenging and difficult. But one of the things about highs and lows, and when I work with entrepreneurs through the Catalyst program, or I mentor young entrepreneurs, one of the things that I realize is they don't really know how to talk about their business, their highs and their lows. Just like me, before I joined the entrepreneurial organization and learned how to talk about my business and be honest with you, I was pretty honest with you about my highs and lows. That's not something a lot of entrepreneurs generally talk about. So a lot of times I know that when I was first talking about my business, a lot of times when I was saying positive things about my business, it sounded more like a highlight reel than actual honesty about my business. And when I talked about my lows, it was more like me complaining than actually talking about the highs and lows of my business. So I want to tell you about the toughest question that an advisor ever asked me. I had learned through circles, and like you probably, a lot of you are probably interested in personal growth. And I heard that when you meet with an advisor, one of the things that you should do is you should lay out your plan, and then you invite that advisor to ask you the toughest question that they can think of about your plan. So I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. I need to try this. So I contacted a friend of mine who's a successful entrepreneur who had been in the business. He's also an author and a public speaker. And I met with him, and I spent about an hour and a half laying out my plan. And then I had this idea, okay, now's the time, all right? I'm going to ask him the toughest question. I'm going to ask him to ask me the toughest question that he can think of. So I said, okay, ask me the toughest question that you can think of. He said, what? I said, ask me the toughest question about my plan that you can think of. He said, you want me to ask you the toughest question that I can think of? I said, yeah, ask me the toughest question that you can think of. And he did. And it took me about 3 weeks before I started liking him again. And it probably took me many, many months to figure out what the heck just happened in that meeting. What I think happened in that meeting was, well, first let me tell you about levels of communication that I learned from Dr. Gerald Bell from the Bell Leadership Institute. There's 3 levels that we communicate at. The first level is just cocktail party talk. It's very shallow, very surface. We might talk about the weather. We might talk surface level about our families, but it's not really any type of deep talk. And that's, Dr. Bell says, that's why nobody likes going to cocktail parties, because the conversation is so superficial. Well, then we get into level 2. And level 2 is more about our attitudes, how we feel about things. We might say, man, I hate that team, or man, I don't like that guy, or I don't like that place, but it's still not the deepest level. It's still just surface stuff. At level 1, if you go to a cocktail party and there's a bunch of entrepreneurs there, you're probably going to get their highlight reel. And level 2, if there's a bunch of entrepreneurs there, you're probably going to get their complaints and their complaint department. That's probably what you're going to hear at that party. But level 3 is the important level. That's the deepest level. And that's where we start talking about the truth. Now, what's important about the truth is that's where problems are solved. That's where communication happens. That's where relationships are built. And this is where great leadership happens, and this is where great companies are built as well. You know, Bill Wilson, who's the founder of AA, says, All progress starts by telling the truth. All progress starts by telling the truth. I like to take those 3 levels of communication and apply them to feedback, because I truly believe that feedback is the breakfast of champions. And a lot of times we can apply those 3 levels to feedback, because sometimes we get level 1 feedback from people. I know I experience it in my restaurants. I'll walk up to a customer and ask them how everything was, and they'll say, "It was good, thanks." That's very level 1 type of feedback. I also experience level 2 type of feedback when people give me a Yelp review and tell me how much they didn't like my service or my food or my atmosphere. That's more about attitudes, about how they felt about things, level 2 feedback. But what we're really after is level 3 feedback, when someone can tell us the truth. And sometimes when it's a negative truth, it's really hard to hear. I think that's what I looked like after my advisor asked me that tough question. I didn't want to hear anymore. So what made my advisor such a difficult question to answer? Part of it was because it was at that level 3. And it's because I wasn't prepared. I didn't go into this meeting knowing that someone was going to ask me such difficult questions at level 3. To be honest, as I look back, I think I gave him my presentation at level 1 and maybe level 2. It was very surface, because I wasn't used to being able to actually go in and get great feedback from someone. I really just wanted to show up, and I wanted him to tell me how great my plan was. That's what I really wanted. So here's some suggestions that I have for you. Be prepared. Know what you're walking into. Be open. Be willing to accept the feedback. Be willing to accept the truth. Be present. And what does it mean to be present? It means you're bringing your energy. It means you're bringing your focus. It means you're bringing your attention to the conversation. I know sometimes when I'm talking to entrepreneurs and the conversation starts to get hard, I start seeing their mind shift, and suddenly, conveniently, they're checking their phone in the middle of our conversation. And of course, do the work. Now, if someone gives you feedback that you don't like, you don't have to just accept it. You can do the work, and you can find out for yourself whether or not what they're saying is true. It's just a perspective that they're sharing, but at least it gives you a starting point. Some don'ts I have. I don't particularly like when people ask me to pick my brain, because I think that's very surface level. I think that's more level 1 kind of stuff. I think it's very safe for people to ask, "Hey, can I pick your brain?" Don't justify. Have you ever had someone ask you for feedback, and then you give it to them and they tell you all the reasons you're wrong about your feedback? Have you ever had that happen? It's pretty frustrating. And don't diminish yourself. This is one of my favorite things. And when I meet with the folks that I mentor and the folks that I advise, that's our number 1 rule. We start off with that. You're not allowed to diminish yourself in any way, shape, or form. I think when people diminish themselves, it's because they're trying to lower the standard and the bar. And I believe that if you came to me as an advisor or a mentor, it's because you're trying to raise your standards and you're trying to reach a higher bar. So I'm not going to allow you to diminish yourself. So why was this question such a tough question for me? And I think as entrepreneurs, we kind of buy into the promise or the dream of entrepreneurship that everything is going to be fantastic. Everything's going to be wonderful. I'm just going to take all of my natural talents and I'm going to create tremendous success. And I think what his question keyed in me is that maybe I have some blind spots about who I am as a person or who I am as an entrepreneur. And I think in a lot of ways, I was kind of lying to myself because I just wanted my plan to be great and I want it to work. And the third thing is I think that I had a misalignment. I was doing a lot of things, in my plan was a lot of things that I enjoy and love to do. And he recognized that me just doing those things are probably not going to help me reach my goals. So in order to prepare, I think there's 3 really great questions that you can ask yourself. And depending on what level you ask these questions of yourself, they can either be, you can either ask yourself these questions at level 1, you can ask yourself these questions at level 2, You can even ask yourself these questions at level 3, whatever you're ready for and prepared for. But I think these are three really great questions, tough questions that you can ask yourself. What am I afraid to lose? What am I trying to hide? What am I trying to prove? I think we're all trying to lose something. Opportunity, power. Sometimes it's just face. Sometimes it's just credibility. And preparing for this talk, and I find myself being nervous, what am I afraid to lose? What am I trying to prove? What am I trying to hide? And those can become really tough questions. So I would encourage yourself, when you're finding resistance in your plan or in whatever it is you're doing, start by asking yourself these 3 questions. Another thing, and what EO Nashville and the Catalyst program has done for me, it's really helped me find other people who can help me with feedback and tough questions. But it's the right people. It's people who I can trust. A lot of times we go and we ask our friends and family for feedback and advice, and they just blast us, and it doesn't feel good, because only another entrepreneur understands what it's like to take this entrepreneur journey. And when you're at early stages, it's a very, very lonely life, and it's hard to find people who understand what it's like to be you. So start by building your network. In this conference alone, there's a couple hundred entrepreneurs here, or people who want to be entrepreneurs. You should be building your network here today. Get to know people. Connect with each other on LinkedIn. Start taking emails. Become friends. Find people who have done what you want to do. Get their name, email. You may not be ready to have a meeting with them today, but you may need them in the future. And our ecosystem of entrepreneurs, I don't know any entrepreneur who wouldn't give an early stage entrepreneur 30 minutes of their time to help them ask some critical questions and get some critical feedback about their journey and their plan. Join an organization. I believe Sherry Deutschman is going to be talking about brain trust in a little bit. We have our entrepreneur center here in Nashville. Vanderbilt has its own entrepreneur center now. Get involved. Join these groups. You may not qualify for all the opportunities that they have right now, but set your sights on them so that you too can seek tough questions. This conversation that I'm having you today is not about you going out and suddenly asking everybody else tough questions. That's an entirely different skill set. One that takes a lot of practice, one that takes a lot of confidence, and one that takes a lot of empathy. It requires a lot of empathy and directness in order to be in a place in your relationship with somebody where you can ask them tough and direct questions. I know from experience, because that question, even by my advisor, even by someone who really cared about me, felt like a wrecking ball to me. I mean, it was probably one of the toughest questions that I ever was asked. And a lot of people always ask me, what was that question, Matt? What was that question that was such a wrecking ball to you, that tore you down like that? The thing about it is, the question that he asked me really isn't as important as what happened after he asked the question and what it forced me to do. It forced me to be able to tell myself the truth about my plan. And it significantly changed the way that I run my companies. Because now, what I recognize when I'm dealing with my leadership team or I'm dealing with my employees, as like when I'm dealing with young entrepreneurs, we have a really hard time telling people the truth about what's going on inside of us, what our fears are, what our insecurities are, what our vulnerabilities are. And I remember the first time I met with a manager and we were having a little bit of a conflict, and I told him what my fear and my insecurity was and my vulnerability was. And not only did the problem that we were trying to solve change, but our relationship changed. And so that was a tremendously effective, tough question for me to answer. If you don't mind, I have a little bit of time left, and I have one more truth that I'd like to share with you, if you don't mind. I'm an advocate for mental health these days, because that's a picture of my wife and I the morning of the Nashville tornado. She made me stop. We had been up all night. but she made me stop to take a selfie because we had thousands of emails and phone calls and messages reaching out to us wondering if we were okay. I think I'm trying to smile there. I don't really know what that expression is on my face. I was pretty numb. I see some friends in the room who saw me that morning, and I probably wasn't very coherent. And that's me in 1991 in Desert Storm. I think I was 22 years old in that picture. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, they told me that there is no cure for post-traumatic stress. You just have to learn to live with it. Well, 28 years later of doing a very poor job of learning to live with post-traumatic stress, I found out that there is a cure for PTSD. And how I found out is through my EO network, through this organization. People who learn to tell each other the truth, people who I learned to trust. And so I believed, despite what I had been told for 28 years, that there is in fact a cure for PTSD. So I finally sought and found the help that I needed for my PTSD. And so I encourage you, regardless of what your trauma is, it could be a natural disaster, it could be the military, it could be from childhood, it could be a car accident, whatever the trauma is, however you got it, however big or small, you deserve to find the help that you deserve. You deserve it. You really have nothing to lose. You've got nothing to prove. And you've got nothing to hide. Because the truth of the matter is about the tough questions is there really are no tough questions when you answer it with the truth. Thank you.